Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
You're listening to an Anazal Ministries podcast. Would you go back in time to learn how to speak whale if it meant saving the future? Well, guys, good news. That's what we're talking about today. Of all things, because we're discussing Star Trek. It's not episode, it's just the fourth movie, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. Guys, I'm excited for this one. This is actually one of my favorites growing up. It's a movie that I'm really attached to, and it's a topic that you guys have heard me ramble on a lot, as this is our special for Earth Day. We're doing this to celebrate Earth Day and to think deeper about our own roles as Christians and humans in the world, and what role we should be playing when it concerns caring for the Earth. And I couldn't do this alone. I'm Joshua Noel. I'm just a guy, but I'm here with some incredible individuals. We have the leading expert Vulcan on humanity, the one and only Christian Ashley. How's it going, Christian?
Live long and prosper, my friend.
Good.
Peace and long life.
Yes. I am also here with the one and only Reverend Justin Coleman. How's it going, Justin?
Going pretty well.
He's just a human, Captain. He's a human. But for some Klingon action, we want the leader of the Klingons. Post some reformation maybe. The one and only Matthew Winter. How's it going, Matt?
I don't know if I want to go to Klingon Reformation.
That'd be
it would be something.
I could pull that up.
Yeah.
Reimagining Martin Luther as a Klingon, and I got all kind of convergences here. This is great.
Yeah.
The 95 Theses turn into the 95 Massacres.
95 Massacres? Oh, God. This is already getting off the rail.
Bat left. It's great. It's going to be great.
Yeah. If you guys didn't know that you needed to kick off your Earth Day with some massacre talk, well, you're welcome. That's what we're here for, to remind you what it's all about. Oh, man. Well, hey, before I ask you guys what we're geeking out on, I want to ask everybody, if you are on YouTube, to smash that like and subscribe button. If you're on the podcast, or if you're on Apple Podcast, smash, was it rate and review? Yeah, rate and review. Spotify is where you do the 5 stars. You got to hit that little bell. And if you're on a laptop, I need you to go over to Podchaser, leave us a rate and review over there, because that really helps the algorithm and other people on computers see who the heck we are. And we would like for them to know who the heck we are. Of course, we want to thank one of our supporters. We shout out a patron, Captivate, or Apple Podcast subscriptor every episode. And this time, it's a friend of ours, Trip Fuller. I want to give you a shout out. Thank you for sponsoring the show, man. You rock. And now let's, Matthew, what you geeking out on lately, man?
Just been geeking out. Started a new small group at church. It's like a part 2 of something I've done before. This is this is the pilot. I've never done the part 2 of this. So, author's Pete Scazzaro. The material is emotionally healthy discipleship. So part 1 we did in the fall, which I had done before. That's emotionally healthy spirituality. That's kind of cultivating the up relationship just through finding stillness and learning to be before you do and all of those sorts of things. And then part 2, which we've never done before, is emotionally healthy relationships. So that's more of incarnational listening. learning to see each other as we truly are rather than our projected expectations, and just how gifting and the spirit and all that stuff flows in and out of all that. So just kind of geeking out on that right now. Getting into that material, reading just a bunch of other books that kind of coincide with that. So just kind of geeking out.
Some geeking out on some more, zesty practical theology. Lately. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It. Nice stuff. All right, Justin, let us know what you've been geeking out on lately, man.
Well, I'd like to lift up a couple things. One, I was at a lecture not too long ago by Rabbi Shai Held, who wrote a book titled "Judaism is About Love." A great look at love through the eyes of the Jewish community, in conversation with Christian theologians as well, but just a wonderful book. So geeking out about that. And I'm geeking out about X-Men 97.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people are on the X-Men kick these days. I've never been a big X-Men fan. If y'all didn't know, I'm known as Josh with the wrong opinions, and that's probably the top of the list for a lot of people. Christian, what you been geeking out on lately,
once
man?
per episode.
More than one. Come on, man.
I was being generous. So, as opposed to my theologian friends here, I watched the. I needed some more Hammer horror in my life, and I'm starting to watch some of those I've never seen before. So I went to Dracula AD 1972. So if you want to learn how to bring back, Count Dracula from the dead, you can perform satanic rites in the church, and that can happen. So it's a documentary. It's pretty good.
I'm gonna get. Yeah.
Not recommended.
Well, I'm going to get real nerdy with everybody right now, because I was just going to be like, Fallout. I was just going to be like, it's Fallout. I love that series. It's great. Instead, let me tell you what I actually spent an embarrassing portion of my day doing. I had realized how excellent the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle looks that's coming out on Xbox and all of the Xbox related things like Game Pass and all that. I don't have an Xbox, never been an Xbox guy. I don't want to go spend $500 on a system so I can play one game. That just seems dumb. So what did I do instead? I spent the entire day trying to figure out the cheapest option of what I can get that will allow me to play that. Because I'm like, technically I can do it on the phone because it's going to be on Game Pass. So I could do that, but it's going to be really wonky. So I was looking at different controllers and stuff I could plug into my phone that would make it a little bit better. I was looking into, I know TJ, shout out to the guy who listens to every episode. He doesn't listen to any episodes, but he...
Nope.
Listen, I know he's starting a business where he's building his own computer. So I was looking into that. Like, how much would it cost to just get a computer built that's only has one function? It only needs to play one game. That's it. And then, I stumbled onto the Xbox Series S, which is like one of the newest Xbox stuff that only plays digital games. I'm like, that might be the route. It's only it's still an embarrassing amount of money to spend for one game. Like, it's like 160 if I get it used. But I'm like, man. Think about how much I spent on Kingdom Hearts 3. I bought a new TV for that. I just spurge a little bit for Indiana Jones.
And it's way less than if you built a computer.
It is way less than that. I have decided. It
was only logical.
Oh, man. So with that, we could jump into our Earth Day special, the spectacular we're about to get into. Before anything else, this is Star Trek 4. A lot of the Star Treks, they're not like Star Wars movies. They don't directly build off each other a lot of the time. This one does. Like, you can tell where it fits in the other Star Trek movies. I don't think you have to watch it, though. Like, I feel like you could just watch this on its own. But still, Reverend Justin, could you give us a little background? What's going on in the Star Trek world? Who are these characters we need to know before we start the movie?
All right. Wow. So this is the original series cast. This is a group that begins the Star Trek tradition of found family. And with the primary three characters being Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, Captain Spock, and Dr. McCoy, who we call Bones. Well, this movie begins picking up from the last where Spock, speaking of resurrections of the non-vampiric kind, where Spock had died and through a process of scientific recreation using a Genesis device, he's alive again, and his soul is placed back into his body. So the movie begins with Spock being a bit disoriented related to this family that he's been a part of. But also there's this disorientation across the part of space they're in, because this alien entity has come and disrupted all communication and technology around whatever it passes, as it is probing different planets and cultures for a language that they don't seem to have in this century. So that's what's going on here at the beginning of Star Trek 4. Am I getting into the movie? Am I doing the movie summary?
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. It's a perfect setup for Matthew Winter to jump in and let us know what happens in Star Trek II, The Voyage Home. What's your elevator version? Like, if you just had to give us like the quickest summary you could of what happens here.
Quickest summary of Star Trek 4. Yeah. So this probe from somewhere far deep in outer space comes, just drains the power of everything as it comes in, and it is evaporating Earth's oceans. There is just this calamitous end of the world apocalyptic thing happening because of this probe. Come to find out, they are there to talk to whales. And because humanity sucks, we've killed them all. So Kirk and crew must go back in time to bring whales to the future so we don't die.
I love it. I love it, especially because like a good movie summary, if you're doing it quick enough, makes the movie seem even more ridiculous than it is, which is hard to do for this film. Like, the more you think about it,
the most ridiculous premise ever.
Oh yeah, it is. Like, the meat of this movie is great. The moment they go back in time, up until they go back to like everything that happened in 23rd century, the beginning and end, stupid. Like, it makes no sense. It's cheesy. It's not good. But that middle, when they're on Earth, that's some fun stuff. That's where the laughs happen. Oh man. Well, does anybody else have any like quick, like what's your feelings, thoughts just initially about the film? You just want to tell us how much you love it before we get into the deeper stuff, or are y'all ready to just jump into the deeper stuff? Or tell us how much you hate it. That would be fun.
Loved it as a kid.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah. Loved it as a kid, obviously, just because it's such a fun, just a ridiculous movie. The music is fun, like all the action and the comedy, and all that's hilarious. And just, can we talk about Spock trying to swear?
Use colorful metaphors. Colorful metaphors.
These are not the hell, you're whales.
I mean, you're whales. Yeah, Spock trying to swear. Then I think the doctor with his 23rd century medicine running through the hospital were probably, well, that, and then the Russian scene, the Russian looking for nuclear secrets. Those are my three favorite. Like, they're so funny, especially you understand like the context this movie happened in. Hilarious.
And that's what's so fun about this movie, because, so I mentioned before that, Star Trek is about found family when you think about these crews. But there are, in the core of the movie, there are multiple storylines going on at the same time, because this core bridge crew has been split up into different missions, which allows moments for each of them to shine. That's part of what I love about this movie. You don't really have anyone that's too muted or think, wait, were they even in this movie? I mean, they all got a moment.
Oh yeah. I love Bones, Spock, Kirk, even Scotty. Like all of their parts in this are like, they're fun too. Like, it's not like the most dramatic Star Trek movie or anything like that. Like, you're not leaving this like with some sense of gratitude, or I don't even really feel like, if you're not trying to do like what we do, I don't even think you're leaving thinking that much. You're just like, that was fun, Yeah. But that being said, right. Christian Ashley was the one who initially suggested we review this movie for Earth Day. So Christian, why does this have to, what is this? I mean, obviously I know, but do you want to like fill us in why you think this is relevant for Earth Day?
Well, Joshua, if we don't take care of the planet, 300 years in the future, a probe is going to head towards us, trying to contact the things that we exterminated. To prevent that from happening, as the space whale Aesop of this film states, we need to take care of the Earth so that when this does happen later on, there is no issue. But the serious answer being like, this is one of the few times I can ever think of in film history where an environmentalist message has been brought into a film and it's not beating you over the head with it. It is brought up and said, yeah, this is serious, something we need to look at, but it's done in a fun way. It's done where I don't feel guilty for anything that I haven't done. Like this is something we can do. We can fight towards. And that's why at this stage in history, we don't have as many countries out there whaling anymore like we used to. Not to say that this film caused all that, but it definitely inspired other people to go into more environmental standards and, protect the earth in other ways, shape and form. That's the importance is, hey, these things that are around here, they're not always going to be here. So let's do what we can now.
Yeah. And I think this movie does a really good job of like paring stuff down to be way more simple than it is. And I say good, like that might sound like a negative, but I really do believe that's a good thing, because I think sometimes it's hard to see the big picture because there's so many different variables and so much nuance in real life. And sometimes we need to just see, if we don't do this, this will happen. Like sometimes we need to be able to see that almost in black and white. And I think that's a positive that this film actually creates for us. Oh man, there's so much to say. I actually do really enjoy this film. And one thing you were getting at that I wanted to bring up, it feels a lot like how I interpret apocalyptic literature, right? Like back in ancient Bible times, when they wrote apocalyptic literature, they usually were not trying to tell you what the future is. Usually what they were trying to do is show you a picture of what the future would be because of what we're doing now. The message is usually for now, not for us to figure out exactly what's going to happen in the future, but rather for us to decipher what's going to happen in our time right now and what should I do about this. And I think that's the kind of message this movie tells. No, it's not an apocalyptic movie, but it does kind of do fulfill the same purpose as some of our apocalyptic literature in the Bible and outside the Bible in ancient Near Eastern times. Matt looks like he's bursting at the seams. Okay, cool. I didn't know if you had more to add.
I'm agreeing with you.
Well, if we're good, then let's talk a little bit more about the film itself. I do just really enjoy this. From the moment they all get into Las Vegas, and it feels a lot more like New York than Vegas, to be fair. But it's fun. It's just fun watching them go around, San Francisco. Thank you. Having no idea like what to do in our time, that they still not used to the idea of like needing money for stuff. Spock tying something around his ears so he doesn't stand out. Like all of it's so much fun. Let's talk about just like the idea of the voyage. So from the point of them deciding together they want to go face the consequences for what they did in movie 3, all the way to the end, there's this story of them going back to the future. So if you didn't know, this is a crossover between Back to the Future and Star Trek. That's not true, but it did come out like a year after the second Back to the Future, I think, something like that. It happened around the same time. But what are our initial thoughts on just kind of the idea of the journey itself? Like, I feel like they just wanted to do time travel, so we're doing time travel. But maybe you guys have better thoughts than me, or something, a little bit, some more deep insight. Y'all have any thoughts on this?
Well, time travel has always been a huge part of Star Trek in the background. And this is before we get into the other series. Like, Next Generation doesn't come out until 3 years after this. Was it 87 or 89?
Yeah.
87. Okay, so it's a year after this.
It's 87.
So we don't have the things that'll happen in those media. But in the original series, they travel back in time 2-3 times already. Mm-hmm. So that's we get some nice callbacks there. And hey, Spock has to hide his ears again. They got to deal with the concept of money once more. So it's not that they're completely foreign to them, but they're having to relearn what they unlearned because it came to this future that will never exist in our lifetime, where money doesn't exist anymore. And everyone just gets along because we say so.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun, though, because it's very antithetical to a lot of Star Trek's message. So a lot of the other stuff that Star Trek does is, here's this idealistic version of the future. So it's almost the opposite of that apocalyptic idea of, hey, this is what could be if we all did things better. But for this movie, they kind of take a sidestep and they're like, okay, but some ways it will be worse if we're doing what we're doing now. So it's like a little bit different than the message Star Trek usually gives us. I find it interesting that all the crew did decide to go back and face consequences. I liked that. I feel like the nerd in me is like, this could have been that first episode of Star Trek where they just did all like legal stuff, that the one from Next Gen everyone talks about, which have a giant court case. That could have been fun for me, but probably would have made it for a terrible movie. So they went a different direction. Yes.
Be a good episode of a show, be a bad movie.
So the other part of the voyage is their part of their engine gets burnt out when they go do the time travel thing, and they have to find a way to recreate the energy they need. So they do a lot of they don't get deep into it, but they talk some about nuclear energy, what humanity was doing at that time, and how they could use it for their own benefit. So I did want to not ignore the nuclear energy part of this conversation, because it does seem to be something they wanted us to think about as well. Reverend Justin, you have any thoughts on how they commented on nuclear energy, or just your own thoughts on nuclear energy, anything like that?
Well, yeah. So just a couple things here. So this is a time when, thinking about sustainability and forms of generating power. Nuclear energy was one where it's all right, so it's doing some cool stuff, but it's also dangerous. And there's a lot of tension around that. And how do we do that well? How can we, in the midst of this nuclear arms race, we're talking about, backing that down. There's all those conversations going on about the threat that nuclear power can have in our world. It's also, I don't know what the proximity of this is to Superman 4, but I know, I'm sorry to make you think about it, but that's also, they had all this nuclear commentary there. So this is a thing that's going on here in movies. And the whole idea that without this power, they would have been stuck and could not save the future. Without nuclear power, you cannot save the future, because in the movie, that energy is going to help to recharge essentially the dilithium crystals on the Klingon ship. So it's necessary to save the future if it's harnessed and used toward a common good. And I think that is what they were trying to say in this.
Sure.
I think this is one of those parts of the film that probably aged way better than the rest, and it's because they played it safe here. So a lot of your media at the time, and especially you being a big Captain Planet fan, and that was actually, I think that's what we did for Earth Day last year, was Captain Planet. Captain Planet was coming out around the same time, and you have bad guys that are just straight up nuclear energy, the bad guy, and it's aged terribly. Because now, as opposed to the 80s, we think of nuclear energy, we actually realize that in a lot of ways, it's much cleaner energy than a lot of the other stuff if we do it correctly. So what's interesting is this film is they still show how at that time it's producing all this terrible byproduct, but then they show how the 23rd century scientists are able to use that byproduct and create clean energy. And I think it was more just a commentary of it was necessary that turned into, as we've aged and we realize that the science of the time was wrong, which, hey, for those who don't know, that's what scientists do. They just constantly try to disprove themselves. It's not a thing against science to say they were wrong. That's what they try to do. They're constantly trying to disprove themselves. That science at the time was wrong. So now we're looking at this in our own time going, oh, yeah, that actually would just be the cleaner energy. And I think it's actually aged really well compared to some of the other jokes in the film about Russians trying to get our nuclear secrets and that kind of stuff.
Hello, friends. If you enjoy Systematic Geekology, a great way to support us and to keep us moving forward into the future is to be a patron on our Patreon network. If you're a Patreon, then you get live access to our YouTube exclusives like Comic Book Ketchup and Manga Mustard, Drinks with Tejas, and also some extra content there with our companion series to go along with our annual theme. If you're a patron, you get exclusive merch like t-shirts and handbags and mugs. There's also a bonus extra question that has extra content. In each episode, we go deeper into our faith and the questions that we're wrestling with, but we also do this extra question to jump in and share about, and patrons get to hear how we answer that question. There's discounts on our store. You get access to any future online D&D campaigns. You can easily access all of our Patreon content through our Spotify page where it says exclusive content for subscribers. That could be you folks. And all that being said, you get the satisfaction that you help us keep the lights on and keep us moving forward with our software, our marketing, our equipment, staying current in the podcast game. We love Systematic Geekology. We hope you do too. Support us moving forward. Thank you for all that you are. We know there's a lot of great choices and content out there, and you choose to listen to Systematic Geekology. Thanks, folks. We love you. Peace.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm pro thorium, and if you follow this stuff at all, actually, we're not too far out from fusion, because we've got some fusion happening in Japan. We're at net gains right now. Like, it takes as much energy to create fusion as fusion creates, but it'll get better. And then when that happens. Anyway, so that's two. They use fusion in Star Trek. I mean, we think of the antimatter reactor or whatever, but they use fusion reactors to create the spark for the warp core. So they're using nuke in the future. So they figured out how to do all that cleanly. And they're just using the radiation to recrystallize the lithium matrix.
So it's interesting how a necessary evil kind of message turned into no, this is actually just the right kind of energy to use. And I think Star Trek even called out and said that in the 21st century we were going to figure out fusion. And here we are.
Yeah, well, I think it's super important too. Remembering when this film is created in 1986, what happened earlier that year? Chernobyl. And then 5 years before that was the 3 Mile Island incident. And in the eyes of the public, nuclear energy was the boogeyman. It was, no, this is evil. And you had all these people rallying against it. Now, not unreasonably so in that, hey, these events happen. We shouldn't be allowing them to happen. But to the point of extremism, legalism in that regard of, well, we should never have any part of it. And this gives a positive message for it within reason of saying, hey, we don't get it now, but if we keep studying it, this is where we're going to end up.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I think the faith community can learn really well from the science community. And that whole thing of always trying to disprove yourself and rather celebrating the times that you figured out you were wrong, rather than we have this thing in the Christian circles I'm around anyway, where it's almost like we're like, oh, we were wrong about that. And it's like, we don't talk about it anymore. Like, we're scared to talk about it because we were wrong about it once. And it's like almost like shame. Whereas the science community celebrates the times they were wrong. And I'm like, I think we might be able to do this better. Yeah. Justin, you have any thoughts? It looks like you're thinking.
No, I mean, I just think it must have been, given all the context that, we've just shared, it must have been a fairly edgy commentary at the time. Like, whoa, okay, so they're gonna, that's the take on it, right? And so it had some teeth there, and again, like you say, it's not overplayed in any kind of way, but it had though we might say subtle, it had some teeth at the time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I didn't want to spend too much time on it because it's not the main crux of the movie, but I do think it's something they wanted us to think about and talk about, and I wanted to give it due diligence. Before we talked about the important stuff, whales. Whales are the important part of this film. So let's get that real big on YouTube for everybody. This is a whale with a Vulcan. Mind melding him in his underwear for some reason. Why did he only took his pants off, nothing else, just his pants. Shirt fine, but pants, nah, that's gotta go. Oh,
he was true. He was wearing
were the robe as well.
So we don't even know if he had. We don't even know if he had pants.
This is the big question they really want us to be asking. What was Spock's attire? Was he wearing pants before this instance or not?
Was Spock wearing pants? Yes.
Well, the great mysteries of Star Trek. What happened?
Whales. So, because I can't be serious right now. I'm struggling. Christian, talk to us about whales. I don't have a good question. Just whales. Go.
Okay. Whales. Whales are one of those species that you first hear about it and go, these massive creatures that just swim in the ocean. They're things. They're just not made up for movies or TV. I remember the first time it was a killer whale, but still a whale nonetheless, was when I went to SeaWorld and saw one for the first time. And I know we're going to be talking a little bit about
killer whales
that later
are
on.
actually dolphins. Fun fact.
Oh, that's
They're
right.
not whales.
Okay. Yeah, that is. Oh, yeah. I am completely wrong. Thank you for correcting me.
Fascinating, though.
Yeah.
They're also not killers.
Yeah, they are cetaceans.
They're just
But they're also
friendly.
But they're also
And
cetaceans.
then seeing like, oh, that's just a small one. Now, I've never actually had the opportunity that I can recall of actually seeing a whale out in the wild, but from watching nature documentaries and stuff like that and seeing, oh, these majestic creatures have been here for quite some time, and they're so loving and gentle, and they'll even be friendly with divers that come up next to them. It's like, why would anyone want to hurt these? Well, then you learn later on there are very useful products that can be made from utilizing whales. You have ambergris, you have oil, you have the meat, you have the blubber, you have all these things that, well, no wonder there was a huge part of American history and the rest of the world too, where we were sending fleets to kill these poor innocent creatures to get what they had, to the point where we went too far. And that's where we get to the point of right now where, no, we can't be doing this because we need a stable population. If we had a stable population, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But the thing is, we don't. And that's not going to happen because they have such a low birth rate and a very long gestation period, if I remember correctly, that it's just not sustainable to be hunting them right now.
Yeah. And see, we get in a tricky conversation when we're talking about hunting in general. And this can be a little bit of a side step, but it's fine. Because, yeah, there is a sense of like, if we don't hunt the deer population, they overpopulate and even become a danger to themselves. So it's like people don't really bat an eye when you talk about hunting deer. But when you talk about hunting whales, even people who just don't have all the context and the morals and ethics and have spent much time thinking about it, it just sounds bad when you say hunting whales. It's almost like we're going to go puppy hunting later. Like, maybe not.
Collect some baby seals while we're at it.
Yeah, like it just sounds bad, right?
Well, I mean, it's, I think it's important for us to remember that, before the age of electricity, whales were our source of illumination, right? This is primarily where we got the oil to fuel lamps, the days preceding electricity. So there's just this kind of global desensitization around whaling. And then you have these conservation efforts as we begin to look at populations of whales. But even today, I was reading just in preparation for this that over 1,000 whales are still hunted each and every year. And we use them in any number of products, mostly related to pharmaceuticals. And then whale meat and things like that are still consumed. But today, likely some of the stuff that you have consumed across the last year has had whale product in it.
Yeah.
Well, 1,000 a year. Right. I mean, that sounds bad, but when you compare
and that's
that
in the right direction, but we're not there yet.
I think that's also why we have the nuclear energy message at the same time, where it's like there's such thing as what do we absolutely have to do for our own survival compared to are we just doing this to do it? So I think it is interesting. Like you said, at one point, it was almost necessary for survival for us to hunt whale.
Right.
But now it seems like it's just irresponsible to do that. Like not only are we damaging, our ecosystem, the whole world's ecosystem, we're also not really getting anything out of it that we couldn't get some other way. It's like at this point, there isn't really a need. And I think there is this thing, and this is maybe not the best Earth Day subject, but we do have to find some balance in some of these topics. So who all's seen The Good Place? Everybody seen The Good Place? Or some of us? Mm-hmm. Do the people who have not seen The Good Place, do y'all care if I spoil something?
Not a thing. I don't care.
Okay. At one point in the show, in order to make a point, they go to find the world's best person. He has scored the best on good or bad place points. And they were going to go find him. And it turns out he was also still going to go to the bad place, which is a whole other thing. But they went to find him, and the stuff that he was doing, like it was to the extent of like he wouldn't eat most plants because some other animal needed to do it. And so if he ate it, he is like, ultimately causing animals harm because he's taking away from them. And he's like, only like the only water he drinks is like recycled urine from himself. Like he like to the extent of the most extreme. And it's like still he wasn't good enough. And the thing is, he was at a point where he was making himself miserable, and he's still not good enough in the eyes of the divine or whatever system is in that show that I don't want to spoil for people. But I think there's a lot of truth there that, like, not only is there the Christian message that you can never be good enough on your own, but there's also this point of, yeah, to an extent, yeah, be there. Let's be responsible. Let's help the planet. But also there is a point where you're taking it so extreme that all you're doing, all you're really accomplishing is making yourself miserable and not getting anywhere for it. So I think there's a little bit of balance here. Not to say that it's not important to take care of the planet, but I'm just saying that there does seem to be a point of, okay, but what do we need to survive? Let's not just make ourselves miserable. Let's think about this and not just be extreme one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good segue to what I messaged you about even, which, so biblically, there's this ideal where we were given dominion, and that all of creation actually exists for man, who is God's final, chief, awesome, good creation. At the same time, there is a balance where we are called to steward and to be responsible the things that we're given. So, I would like to open the conversation and really just ask, where do those intersect? Like, how do we believe, we have dominion and that nature exists for our benefit because our creator created a world that could sustain his creation.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to be responsible.
Yeah, I'll say when it comes to this scenario, it's like, what is a reasonable amount of controlling the world versus controlling the world in our image and doing whatever pleases? And I would argue that the whaling industry, it got to that point where it didn't matter. Yeah, even if we keep going at the rate we're going, the whales are going to be gone. That's okay because we're still going to make a profit off of it. That's when there's a huge moral dilemma. That's when there's a huge issue. There is no issue whatsoever in a sustainable population of killing a whale, harvesting what it has. That's what animals are around here to do because we are omnivores. Some people try and deny that about themselves. Some people have actual legitimate medical reasons not to. But it's part of our life. And that we harvest a deer or a bird or a chicken or what have you. It's like that is here for our benefit, but what do we do with them also defines us. Do we have a bunch of chickens like an inch apart from each other, completely in darkness or what have you, just so they can grow enough to be fed to people? Do we continue to allow other countries in the world to go after whales because it's part of their culture or, they're making a profit off of or what have you? That's where I have the issue. That's where the dominion becomes in my own image versus I am actually in charge as directed by God.
So, Justin, did you have something you want to say?
Well, I was going to say, so, one of the things as we think about that injunction there in Genesis 1 to have dominion, some translations talk about mastering the earth. Dr. Ellen Davis, who some of you might be familiar with, an Old Testament professor or Hebrew Bible professor, has said that the Hebrew word there that we typically translate as dominion or mastery has the verb has two elements. One is skill and one is power. And so, she has recommended translating it, skilled mastery, which gives, which adds a little bit of a texture, I think, to it, because this idea of dominion really has been used in unhelpful ways. If I'm to dominate, I can do whatever I want. I'm not thinking about the need for anything to last. but this almost artistic view of working with natural resources might make me think, well, there's elements of preservation as well as use, not just consuming here.
So, man, I might get a little heretical in here. Sorry, guys.
What else is new?
Christians used to it. It's fine. So a couple of the instances
I'm so surprised
I find interesting is obviously first, I think Genesis 1 was written separately from 2 and 3. Like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence that they're the same author. So I find it interesting. Genesis 1.
I'm fine with that.
It is let's subdue, let's care for, let's, that kind of stuff. But then after the flood, the same command is given to Noah and his children, but instead it's now creation fears you. Now it trembles. Now you're lording over it. So I think that difference exists for a reason. And then when you look at Genesis 2 and 3, where animals are in harmony, and then as mankind sins, all of a sudden death and killing and hunting and all this stuff enters in. I think there's a direct correlation to the sin of man, the fall of man, the flood, and how the world around us interacts with us. And when we go through the Bible and it talks about salvation, a lot of the times it's not saying personal salvation, human salvation. It's saying the whole world. In Isaiah, it talks about the birth pains of salvation are in the whole planet. So I think there's this thing of as we pursue salvation, we're pursuing not only our own health spiritually, but we're pursuing the health of other humans and the health of our planet. And that includes caring for, presiding over, and nurturing the planet. Now, does that mean never eat any meat? No, we are omnivores, as Christian pointed out. And one of my favorite, this might be blasphemous to talk about Lil Dicky, but one of my favorite songs by Lil Dicky, he has a song called Pillow Talk. And he's with this girl who's a vegetarian. And I love this line because she's all like grossed out that he's a meat eater. And she's like, and they produce all these animals and they like grow them just for slaughter. And she's like, that's gross. And he's like, hold up. So if some wolves are out here, do you think they're going to like respectfully not eat you as you leave? Like, no, but that's what wolves do. They attack. I was like, that's what people do. We cultivate and then we eat. Like that is the nature of humans. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, is there a way to do it in gross, irresponsible, and what I think is just evil ways? Yeah. Like I will not eat, chicken if it doesn't say cage free on it. Cause for me, that's a line where I'm like, if I can afford to do, and again, this is, a lot of times it's affordability, but if I can afford it, which these days I usually can, I'm going to get cage-free chicken because I think it's irresponsible and even cruel to do what Christian was talking about, where they're growing chickens so close to each other that their skin is growing around the cages. Like there's something inhumane and just, that's not the kind of thing that God called us to when he's talking about nurturing and guiding over animals. That is us. How can we profit? That's gluttony to the extreme. Both, and how much we need to consume and how much we just want to make profit. And I think that is a certain level of evil that I'm like, and again, I know some people can't afford to eat all cage free or can't afford cage free eggs. And I don't mean to make anyone feel bad, but that is the kind of thing that I think about when I'm thinking of what does it mean to responsibly interact with the earth, where when I'm not living a sinful life, creation is interacting with me better, not worse.
Right. I mean, just one more thing to say about this whole idea of sin and how it distorts. So one of the things you see immediately in the midst of this judgment, which is telling us how this sin is going to affect us, is you start seeing disconnection. So, if salvation, in the Greek at least, is sozo, it's healing. So what's one of the things it heals? Well, it heals our disconnection. And growing sense of disconnection and, no longer seeing, appreciating the circle of life, the cycles of really anything, the interconnectedness of anything and anyone is part of the thing that is damaged and distorted in what we popularly call the fall. And so what this redemptive move that we think about, at least from a New Testament perspective, that's part of the healing. Is healing the ability for us to see the connectedness not only with one another, but kind of an us and all creation. I'm going to go, what is it? Psalm 36:6. It's God's come to save us and all creation.
Amen. Hallelujah. There's one more note I think we need to hit on this. Going along with the lines of the movie, there does part of this conversation, we have to, I think, touch on the ethics of zoos in general, of conservations, habitats, all this kind of stuff that we create, where we're keeping animals in captive. And the movie does some of this really well, I think. And again, it's where it's oversimplifying some stuff, where you see this dilemma. We have the whales in captivity because they were injured. Now they're about to be pregnant. They need to be let go. But if we let them go, there's going to be whalers that are going to hunt them. Usually it's not this direct. We know this is immediately going to happen when we let them go. But that is the conversation when you talk to people around like the zoos and stuff today. The conversation usually is the research done in zoos and in conservations is done to help the animals that are out in the wild. And also a lot of the times the ones in captivity, if we let them go, don't have the same defenses and stuff that they're going to last very long in the wilderness. And we also know, even though that a lot of the times they're less happy in smaller environments, animals typically live longer when they're being protected as opposed to the wild where we have all this pollution in the water, all these poachers, hunters, etc. The expectation of life for animals in zoos are way longer than those out in the wild. So we have this conversation of, are the animals as happy as they could be when they're in captivity? No. Are they going to live a little bit longer? Yes. Is it going to help us prolong the life of other animals in the wild? Yes. But is that worth it? And that's the big question people have now. Let's get Christian's thoughts on this. Christian, go.
Yeah. As someone who in another life would have ended up being a marine biologist, if I didn't have to take chemistry as a prerequisite and have to do math with my science, that's another thing. I would have probably been in this field in some way, shape, or form, because one of my goals was to study sea snakes and sea kraits and take their venom, try and get anti-venom for it, because I believe at this point in time, we still don't have that. That's one useful way we can bring those creatures into captivity, look upon them and say, how many people die per year from being bitten? There is no known cure. There's no anti-venom. Well, that's because we haven't done enough research yet. We haven't found that one thing that gets us there. And then when it comes to zoos and even things like SeaWorld, the abuses at SeaWorld, never for them, 100%. I think they should have been more room for everything there. I am okay with them being in cages. I'm okay with them being in these domes so long as they have the space. They don't get depressed. They don't just end up losing the will to live at a certain point in time because of the educational properties that brings to us. I learned a lot just from that one trip when I was like 6 or 7 going to SeaWorld that inspired more to make me research more. That never would have happened had I not been introduced that way. The same thing, I was always a big zoo person growing up. I would go with my parents and my grandparents and I would name the zoos by color. There was the brown zoo, there was the green zoo. They had actual names, but to me, they're just these, I would associate a color with them and that's where they were. And I learned so much more about these animals that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do were they not in these caged up environments far away removed from where they're actually supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, are they handled well there? Are they being loved and cared for? Not always. And that's not something I can solve, but it is something we need to be mindful of. There is a price to pay for the knowledge that we gain here.
Yeah, I'm talking a little bit more about it here in a minute, but SeaWorld specifically, some of the worst just things that we've done to sea creatures were done in SeaWorld. But also, I think it was like if you combine every other program in the world right now, it still doesn't save as much sea life as SeaWorld has saved. like the amount that they save and manage to help. I don't think we can turn away from that and act like SeaWorld's all evil, but we also can't act like they're all good.
So it's also good to note that we've got various paradigms here, and this has been an evolving conversation from the, zoos as a kind of menagerie for the aristocratic. Like zoos were the first World Wide Web, right? So, you're bringing all these things from across the world to a place so that people, mostly the elite, can view it and learn from it, not in a healthy way. And then, zoos today, I mean, they're just various different kinds. Like the zoo that is closest to me, I've actually appreciated in some ways because they create these natural habitats, mostly for African and North American animals, and so natural habitats where they try to put vegetation that approximates the vegetation of where these animals come from. And so like the one of the areas in the African animal habitat is larger than most zoos in our country. So they're it's not perfect, but then I think there are different ways you can do it and conceive of it that are more humane toward these creatures. But still, the bottom line today is we are creating the conditions globally where it's hard to sustain the life of some of these creatures. So, it goes from this menagerie that is just really unhealthy and unhelpful, and the practices of SeaWorld and such, to oh my gosh, we might need some of these places so that we can avoid extinction for some species.
Yeah. Chris and I both started college wanting to do marine biology at UNCW. I still visit Wilmington a lot. I love the city. I think it's a beautiful place. It's Wilmington, North Carolina. And they have a sea turtle conservation there that, or near there. It might not be in there. I'm trying to remember exactly where it's at. Y'all don't quote me. Just know there's a sea turtle thing near that. There's somewhere on the coast of North Carolina, But one of the things I like about
Knowles, the aquarium there, I think.
I'm not thinking about the aquarium. This might be at what's the island near there that nice people had beach houses at? Surf City, somewhere around there.
A couple different ones like Bald Head Island, which has got a great conservatory.
Guys. Anyway, sea turtle conservation. One of the things I found really interesting when I visited is they had to let people visit because otherwise they couldn't gain enough funds to continue doing what they're doing. So they need people who can come and watch and enjoy the turtles so that they get the money to keep doing what they're doing. What are they doing? They're rescuing turtles who've mistaken plastic bags or whatever nearby in the ocean as jellyfish or whatever, who get stuck, they get suffocated, whatever, and they get brought back in. One of the things I thought most telling that really speaks to this conversation for me is they were talking about there was a few turtles who they've had more than once. So they let them go because they got healthy, whatever. And then they come back next year, find another plastic bag, and here they are. And it's almost like, man, if we would have just kept the turtle, it wouldn't have had to go through that again. And I understand why we don't. But that's part of this conversation when we're thinking about aquariums and zoos is we've created terrible environments in the wild for these creatures. And I do feel like we have some obligation to do something about that. Zoos, aquariums is one answer. Is it a perfect answer? No. Are there better answers? I don't know. I'm not sure what they are, if there are. Matt, did you have any other thoughts when it comes to this kind of stuff? Before I got one last topic with this I want to jump into.
Not really. I mean, those are good. Those are good questions. Because the fact of the matter is, the world that we have created, a lot of the times, these animals are better off in captivity. Because they just won't survive in, with what we've done to their environment.
All right. I'm going to give one practical thing, and we can move on from this topic then. Because I am at risk currently of being hypocritical because I constantly talk about how I hate utilitarian arguments of the ends justify the means, and we're doing this terrible thing because in the end, that's better. Here's the thing. When we plan out our actions and we consider what is the best action, we're not just thinking of the end outcome. We're thinking of like currently, what's the best action to take? When you do something where you just take it, well, if we keep the turtle, it's less likely to go through this again, then you could slowly justify more and more stuff, right? If we do this research and we collect the sperm, then that's going to help us provide for future generations. And if we do this education is more valuable for humans. And before you know it, you're doing some of the terrible things that happen in SeaWorld. Here's how we stop stuff like that. We create systems ahead of time where we say, here are the lines. Here's what we think is okay and what's necessary to preserve life. And here's what's not okay. And here's where I maybe upset some people. That Black Fin documentary if you go online, you could see there's just a document of how many things it said that was just directly false. And it's absurd amount. Like the amount of things that it said was just wrong information or just lies. Should be a crime. Maybe it is a crime for it to be out there. Like, but at the same time, if you go through one of those other documentaries that talk about why Blackfin is wrong, they embellish the other side. Like that's just what it does. So one example I'm thinking of is in the Blackfin documentary, they show where orcas at SeaWorld have that curved fin on top. And they're saying that's because they don't get to move enough and they're sad and they're depressed and this is evil. But then if you actually talk to a biologist who studies orcas for any period of time, that whales in the wild get that a lot where it curves on top. That's actually a rather frequent thing that happens. And a lot of orcas simply just decide to stay close to a certain bay or something. And they don't actually move that far out because they have plenty of food where they're at. And when that happens, that's when they're torpal fin curves over. So actually, if they're being provided for, taken care of well, and they're in a small environment like that, that's just what would happen. Like that's not some evil thing that Blackfin made it out to be. That's just biology, just what it is. So you got to learn about these things. And people like us and theologians and Bible people usually aren't the best equipped to talk about this. So here's who should be talking about it. Who should be making the standards are other biologists. So there's what's called the AZA accreditation. And I make it a point, and hey, since all you're doing is deciding not to do something, everyone can afford to do this. Just simply don't go to zoos or petting zoos or any of those things that are not AZA accredited. Because if they're not, there's a reason they're not. And if they are, they're making more money for being AZA accredited. So they have the incentive to be accredited. There's no incentive not to be accredited other than you're doing some stuff that wouldn't let you be. And I even got to say, Disney's Animal Kingdom at one point lost accreditation, and I had to avoid Animal Kingdom until it got accreditation back because there's a reason that it lost that, right? Right now, SeaWorld actually is AZA accredited. So is Animal Kingdom. And I think this is an important thing because we know when you see that there are people who are outside that are not making money from Disney or from SeaWorld who are observing what's happening and saying, this is responsible, ethically taking care of the animals, providing information for others that is useful and helping our planet. So that's where I think zoos and aquariums that are AZA accredited to me are an overall good. I can see the argument for it not. Do I think it's better for animals not to be in captivity? If we had a good world for them to be in, sure. I don't think I would love the idea of them all being captives, but it seems like it might be the less of two evils at the time. All right. Any other thoughts from anybody? Thank you guys for letting me go on my AZA rant. I realize I've done this before on the show and I apologize. So back to the movie. If we're rating this 0 to 10, where are you guys putting the whale apocalypse film?
I'll set the standard. This movie is a 10 out of 10.
Yes.
You can't go wrong. I adore this film. Like, is it my favorite Star Trek movie? No, there's actually two. I would even give 10 out of 10s before this. That'd be Wrath of Khan and First Contact. But this would probably be my third favorite on that list. And that's a very great list to be on these even numbered Star Trek films that are good. And it's got what you need. It's got good characters. It's got good humor. It's got a goofy setting and premise that should never work without everything this has working together for it. Leonard Nimoy did tremendously great work as a director to make this stupid idea sound intelligent.
Beautiful. Justin, follow that up. What do you rate Star Trek: The Voyage Home?
I want to give it a 10 out of 10 as well. I really very strongly agree with Christian's list of the movies there. It is a movie where you feel like you've settled into a wonderful groove with each of these characters, with what this movie is trying to do. One of the things that we haven't talked about that I've read in blogs, other places, is how much this is a great movie about healthy allyship. Because rather than them saying in the 23rd century, hey, let's just figure out a way to replicate sound and see what it does, they actually went and got the voices that could actually speak authentically. And so just it's kind of a cool idea there, right? And so I think in so many ways, it's just a good movie, and one where I got to love this family that's on this ship in so many ways and have fun with them.
Man, yeah, y'all be looking forward to, we're going to do another review of this film, but it's just going to be us talking about how Christians can learn from Star Trek 4 when we're speaking to the other, how to speak their language. There we go. Matt, if you had to review this film, 0 to 10, where you putting it?
Oh gosh. You know, if I'm to allow myself to wear the nostalgia goggles, then absolutely, then absolutely 10 out of 10. But, you know, I'm at a point right now where things like plot and good writing and things like that matter. So for fun and entertainment, it is a 10. But for plot and writing, I don't even know that I can score this thing.
I just want to give. I want to rate Matthew's review right there for a moment. I mean, with all the drama that went into, I'm at a point in my life with things like plot matter.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh man.
You know, so if it's at like a 2 for plot and writing and a 10 for entertainment, I gotta give it like a 7.
That's fair.
Fair.
All right. I'm going to be pretty close to Matt on this, actually. If I'm, mind you, this is the first Star Trek I ever remember seeing. I loved this as a kid. This is beautiful. It's like I talked before about how like I haven't seen a lot of Star Trek until recently. This is something I've been watching my whole life. So this movie is one of the exceptions to that rule. Man, it's so hard. Here's how I'm going to do it. If I'm rating the parts that happen in the 23rd century, that part's getting like a 4 out of 10, maybe a 5. Like it was just the plot and everything was all over the place. It was just nonsense of, hey, we want them in the 1980s. How do we get them there? Right. But if we're talking about the bulk of the film, like all but like 20 minutes happens in the 1980s, that part alone, that's a 10 out of 10. That's a beautiful, like from start to finish, everything's coherent. It makes sense. The acting's well done. The cinematography's fun. The jokes are great. They all landed well, even, all this time later for me. So as a whole, again, the beginning and end, that 23rd century part, is probably close to a 4. But we're talking about the 80s. I'm giving that a 10. So at the end, I'm going to give it about an 8 out of 10 because most of it happened in the part that I liked. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with this one. All right. Anybody have any final thoughts on Star Trek: The Voyage Home? Does it stand the test of time? Do you have any like favorite characters or scenes you want to uplift before we move on?
I just want to say that just related to Star Trek, it does a good job in living into this idealism related to the future. That is such a Gene Roddenberry thing, right? And so as far as, reaching down and connecting to that, what's we think of as like pure and good about Star Trek, I think it touched on that well.
Mm. Yeah, this is going to get to another thing we recorded recently that's not out yet that Christian probably not going to like that I'm referencing, but he won't. Our listeners might not even know what I'm referencing. It's fine. I feel like this movie was the deconstructionist movie for Star Trek. Because you see, when they go in the 1980s, there's all these moments of the stuff that they take for granted or that's good about Star Trek that the movie kind of makes jokes about, right? Like how Spock is and how he's just so not human and how he just stands out. They kind of just poking jokes at Spock throughout it, but in a loving way, it feels like it's not like in a mean kind of way, but it's lovingly throughout. Scotty is just like, let's just give him this invisible aluminum so I get what I want. And and you see throughout the film, like they're joking on the Russian, they're just picking jokes here and there, even Kirk's, womanizing thing, but it's all done in a loving way that at the end you appreciate the characters more. So that's something where I feel like it was a bit of a deconstructionist movie, but really in a positive, fun kind of way. All right. Any other thoughts on Star Trek: The Voyage Home?
Nah, just that if no one has seen it, they should. It's a fun movie.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say I don't know how I feel about the deconstructionist idea for the movie. I'd have to give him more thought on that. I'm going to go with my default and say you're wrong.
Fair.
And I'll get back to you. And maybe we'll even record that conversation. But for characters, yeah, everyone has a chance to shine in this film. Like we talked before, perfect moments for everyone. That the other than the main three, they get their chances. Sulu gets to pilot the helicopter at the big moment there to save them with the supplies, and you have Uhura and Chekhov going on a stealth mission together to get the nuclear energy, and of course, like. For me, the standout character was Bones. Him reacting to the bloody dark ages in this film of medicine. And normally in a Star Trek movie, there would be that, like, we can't affect the past. You can't do this. And it's kind of like that moment that Will and I talked about when we had the JLA Avengers crossover, where Batman tells everyone not to interfere with the Marvel universe, but then he sees the Punisher about to kill some drug dealers, and who's the first person to break the rules? It's Batman. Who's the first person to break the rules to not interfere with the present? It's Bones. He sees this woman on dialysis, decries the fact that this is a thing in this time and place, and he helps her.
Yeah,
it's a smaller moment, but it's such a powerful character moment for him, and I love it.
Another good Bones moment early on. I like because for those who don't know, the third movie, Bones was basically possessed by Spock. It was a thing. Don't worry about it. I feel like that's just how the movie treats it. They're like, don't worry about that. It happened. But there was a point where Bones is really trying to connect with Spock. It's Spock's being like super Vulcan and just not wanting to connect. And he asks about death. And you know, given my accent and stuff, it was one of those things where like that kind of conversation, it's like somewhat triggering for me, because how often someone's like, oh, did you see something? Or, oh, did it? And listen, guys, I don't hate anybody who's asking me this stuff. It's just, you hear it repeated so much. You're like, man, okay. All right, guys. But he asked Spock, and Spock's like, I couldn't quite describe it to you until you've experienced it. And I was like, I love that. I love that moment where Spock's like, go die. And then we can talk about it. It's just good times. Oh man! All right.
It kind of accidentally foreshadows something
that can be arranged.
One of the few good parts of Star Trek V, where Bones deals with the death of his dad.
Oh yeah. You know,
I know they probably never intended it to be that way, but if you just look at it like that, it feels like it was foreshadowed.
Also, kind of let you know, I've been because I haven't really been part of the Trek community, because I've only seen the original movies. I've been really nervous to talk about the original movies with other Trek fans. Because I'm like, man, what if like I go into this thinking I love Star Trek 4, and then Christian's like, this is the Last Jedi of Star Trek. This is garbage. You know, like I was a little bit nervous going in. Like, what's he going to say about this film?
No.
I don't think there's anything in Star Trek that has fallen to those pits of despair.
How do people feel about Star Trek 6? This is my final question. Do people typically like it, hate it?
I enjoy 6.
Yeah,
I find it entertaining and amusing. Like, it makes me laugh.
It's a good movie. It's very much just like this one, very much a product of its time. You know, it is obviously like Cold War commentary.
Yeah. Like
not even veiled. They're not even hiding it.
Yeah.
But it's good. I like subterfuge is always good. Mm-hmm. And, when there's spies and all that's always good. And I don't know. I think just the character development that happens in that movie. Mm-hmm. It's another movie where there's kind of cliche. This is Cold War commentary plot line, but it's written in a way through the characters that elevates it to be far more than that.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I didn't mean to just randomly start reviewing another movie. I just was curious what everyone's thoughts were. I remember like growing up having only watched Star Trek 1 through 6. I always felt like there was supposed to be another one. Like it was like, that just didn't feel like that was the last one. That was the only thing that I had with it, where I was like, this doesn't feel final. But that's all. Well, if everybody else is good, we can go ahead and go to our wrap up. Is everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then let's go ahead with everybody.
Define good.
As we're wrapping this one up, let's go ahead and ask everybody for a recommendation. Doesn't have to be Star Trek related or anything like that. Just anything you think people deserve to check out. I'll start first. everyone should check out Fallout. It's kind of bugging me that it's not getting the same hype as the Last One Standing, because I think it's better. Personally, it's really good. It's good TV. People need to watch it. All right, Christian, you got a recommendation for everybody?
Yeah, if you need some more cetacean action in your life, then I suggest going to After War Gundam X, where you will hear the words Dolphin New Type. And that's all I'm going to say.
Oh, I just, the amount of sci-fi that's like, hey, space, you know what it needs? Whales, space whales, like Star Wars, Star Trek, Treasure Planet. Like pretty much any sci-fi I could think of at some point decided there's got to be whales in space, right? Justin, what do you have a recommendation for everybody?
Well, I've already said it, and I know everybody's already watching it except for you, but X-Men 97 is so good. And this was my favorite comic strip growing up. Professor X is my favorite superhero. Oh, he's the Malcolm X of the comic book world, right? So, I'm loving it, even though it has less Professor X than I'd like, but not completely absent.
You, Will, and Christian need to hop on and talk about that. I think. Yeah,
let's do it.
It sounds like one in the works. All right, Matt, do you have any recommendations for everybody out there?
Sure. I mean, I'm probably the only person in existence that hadn't seen it yet. But, for, getting ready to record the other one, I've been catching up on a lot of Star Wars stuff. And love Clone Wars. I just, I always avoided it. Always avoided it for whatever reason. I don't know if it was animated or whatever. So it's just like, eh. But if you haven't seen Clone Wars, and you're the kind of person that likes to know like the in-between stuff, watch Clone Wars.
Yeah, seconded.
Yeah.
Also, bold move to recommend Star Wars on a Star Trek episode.
I love it though. No, but right before we started Systematic Geekology as a show, I watched all of Clone Wars. And it's because TJ has bothered me for most of our friendship because I kept saying that Revenge of the Sith was just a bad movie. I still think it's a bad movie. It's one of my least favorites. It's no longer my least favorite, probably because of Clone Wars and also because Slime was just so bad. But he made me watch Clone Wars to make it better. And he was like, it'll make it better. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. It can't be made better. I was wrong. It was made better. Still not a good movie, but it was better after Clone Wars. So yeah, I gotta also recommend that one. That's a good one. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you everybody for listening. We wish you a happy Earth Day, or if you're listening to this after Earth Day, we hope you had a happy Earth Day and that you're doing stuff like visiting AZA accredited zoos to make the planet better. Hey, be sure if you're on Apple Podcasts to rate and review. If you're on Spotify, hit the 5 stars and the little notification bell. And if you're on your laptop, go over to podchaser.com. Leave us a rate and review over there because that helps the algorithms find us. Also, if you're on YouTube, smash that like and subscribe button because if you don't, you're smashing Will's heart and no one wants to do that. So just smash that like button. It's worth it, I promise. And hey guys, again, big thanks to Trip Fuller for sponsoring the show. You rock, man. Remember one very important thing, and that is that we're all a chosen people, a geekdom priest.
Check out our merch online at the SG Shop. There you can find clothing such as hat, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, and more things like glassware, mugs, bags, and posters. My favorite shirt design is the one that says all reading counts. So make sure you check out the store and find your new favorite merch.
Hey friends, this is your pal, Will Rose, and I have some exciting news. Systematic Geekology will return to Theology Beer Camp this year, October 17th through the 19th in Denver, Colorado. And we hope that you can join us. We are part of Theology Beer Camp in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, at my home church in my hometown. And that year, Theology Beer Camp was called the God Pods. And then we were in Missouri, a part of the Geek Stage. Yes, we had a whole entire Geek Stage where we had workshops and speakers and had incredible conversations. And Theology Beer Camp last year was called the God Pods strike back. So you kind of see where this is going. And so this year, the theme is the return of the God Pods. And so if you head over to Eventbrite and follow God Pods 2024, or hop over to Instagram, follow it there. And if you enter promo code Geekshire, you see what we did there? Yeah. Wilbo Baggins approves. If you enter Geekshire, all caps, no spaces, you'll get $25 off your ticket price. Geekshire, all caps, no spaces, Geekshire. Yeah, say it with me, Geekshire. Enter that. You get money off your ticket, and you can join us and hang out and drink beer and have great food. And even if you don't drink beer, you can have incredible food and beverages and conversations with your favorite hosts here at Systematic Geekology. The Geek Stage is growing. I'm proud of that, and we thank Trip for this opportunity. We hope to see you at Theology Beer Camp, the Return of the God Pods 2024.